Hello and welcome. My name is Christoph Bolgen and I'm the industry manager for thermoprocess technology at JUMO. Today we will take a short look at typical challenges that arise during calibration according to AMS 2750 or CQR9 from the perspective of our service department. I have invited my colleague Thomas Stumpf, who performs calibration for our customers on a daily basis. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you. You are welcome.
Why is this topic so important? AMS 2750 and CQR9 place a high demands on thermoprocess reliability. If you don't calibrate and document properly, you risk quality problems, rejects, or even the loss of certifications. Let's take a look at the problems that really do occur during frequent practices or calibrations. Thomas, based on your experience, what are the most common stumbling blocks when calibrating according to AMS 2750 or CQR9?
The biggest stumbling block are the correct measurement of the instrumentation. An example are the offsets present, yes or no. This must then be measured against with the SAT test.
So offsets play a big role just because you need to take them out, right?
Right.
Normally before you do the first testing, you take the offsets out. If you leave them in there, you get a different value, which is not correct, if I understand that, right?
Yeah. After the standard.
Yes. Yeah. So the standard AMS CQI tells you we have to take the offsets off, and that's what also our auditor tells us most of the time. Take them out, do the calibration, and then have the correct value without the offsets, and then you can go further ahead, right?
Right. And when you put in the offset, so you must test it again with a SAT measurement, and so to check if it's correctly or not.
Awesome, perfect. When it comes to instrumentation testing, what are typical errors or problems you encounter during the time while you do the testing?
Yeah, there is always the problem with the connection between the temperature sensor and the controller or the display device. So it's better to use our thermobox because so we have the right connection between the sensor and the controller, and it's easier to put in the device for testing the instrumentation tests. And also you have no problems when you use a calibrator to put in the values.
The values, yes. So I think over here what we did, we put the connection in parallel. So when you do the testing and you take out the thermocouple and then you test with your calibration device, then no error comes or no value is missed, because when the value loses it, normally the thermoprocess furnaces break down, it gets an alarm, right? And then you have trouble with shutting off the burners, and then the whole batch pretty much is ruined.
Right.
Or
the temperature is lower, and so you must wait bis the temperature is on the right position.
Yeah.
And so it's easier to use those thermobox.
Yeah. And I remember you just told me you were at a calibration site too, and there were a little trouble with the calibration of the SAT or instrumentation just because there were no connection bugs?
Yes, and we have the problems because the thermocouples was between the
chain drives?
Chain drives, right. And so it's not good for the security for the man who makes
the calibration.
And so it's also better to use the thermobox.
Okay. So you mentioned already the system accuracy test, the SAT test. Where do systems fail most often? Do you have any idea, or can you tell us?
Yeah, the system most often fail because there's not SAT implementation available. That is, there is no entry hole where the reference SAT sensor can be inserted. This is often in older systems, and it's recommended to retrofit with HUMO sensor with a SAT a hole inside, because then you have always the same position by the recurring subtests. And when the customer use a new furnaces, normally it's inside with this
kind of sensor.
Kind of sensor. Yeah.
With a subtest hole. Yeah, so the guidelines actually tell you always have to measure on the same distance to the controlling sensor. So it's helpful that you have such a subtest hole to get the exact difference position. To the position to the controlling thermocouples. On the old furnace, you mentioned already, there is not always a subtest hole. A lot of people don't like to put another hole in it to get there and to get the reference measurement.
It's always to the atmosphere inside when you have in furnaces, for example, with a special atmosphere. So we have the atmosphere can not throughout to the sensor.
Yeah.
So it's really better to use like this sensor.
Yeah. And like you mentioned already, you're always at the same position. That's what the guidelines ask you to do too. You always have to have the same position, and with such a subtest hole, it's easy to do.
Right.
And I think this shows you already the newer version of furnaces, they have such implementation already. The older ones you kind of need to retrofit. There's also another calibration thing or calibration survey, which is called temperature uniformity survey. The temperature uniformity survey measures the different temperatures in the whole furnace. Doing this temperature uniformity survey, what are typical sources of error or challenges that arise? Can you tell us?
Yeah, typical sources of error included the correct sensor placement. This must be correctly positioned according to the standard. It may, of course, happen that the spatial content does not lie with the tolerance of the standard. Then the test space must be reduced and the measurement repeated. And also it's a little bit problem by a continuous versus when you put in the two sensors between the material charges. So we have the problems because the new material must be heated to the set point temperature, and then we have the problem that the temperature is going lower.
Yeah.
And so it's important then you put in the TAS sensors after a few minutes that the new material is in the continuous furnace, and then you put the TUS sensors in those places.
Yeah, so you're saying the placement is really important for the new temperature uniformity survey. The trailing thermocouples must lay correctly. I did already a couple of calibrations with you. I know, for example, the chamber furnace is fairly simple because there's always a frame where you can connect it, or the new furnaces, they have like a mechanism where you can drop it and connect the trailing thermocouples to in the chamber furnace. But I know we have some trouble with a continuous furnace, belt furnace, and so on. Sometimes they also move during the time when it gets pushed through or getting through, and then the TUS or the survey is actually not good anymore, and then the batch is ruined, right? And and like you said, it always needs to lay in the material, or you have also a frame so it doesn't move, but it also needs to be in the material, otherwise it's getting too hard, because when the thermocouple, it's fairly thin, we use normally 3 millimeters, right?
Right.
And when it's get directly heated with fire from the burner, then normally you go above the upper limit, and then when you go above the upper limit, the TUS test didn't pass.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
And that's, I think, one big thing we need to check out. All right. Do you have like a specific example from practice where a small deviation had a big impact in those measurements?
Yes, we tell about this with a continuous furnace. So it's very important to have the right places for the task sensors, and so we have in one time between the material batches, and so the task measurement had not passed.
Yeah.
And so we have the problems. The customer can't deliver the material to the customer because it was not in the standard from CQE. And so it's very important to put the right position for this task measurement.
So, and when you test the temperature uniformity survey with material, you need to make sure that it passes, otherwise the batch is ruined, right?
Right.
And then, or they have to do testing afterwards, a lot of testing that the material is still good.
Yes.
Okay, I understand, that makes sense.
Okay.
Do you have 3 more tips for us, maybe from your practical testing calibration during that time for us, for our listeners?
Yeah, tip 1 is really this thermoboxes for the instrumentation tests. It's for the controller easier to do the tests.
Mm-hmm.
The next tip 2, is to use temperature sensors with a SAT hole integrated.
Mm-hmm.
So the controller have always, by the continuous tests, always the same position.
Mm-hmm.
And tip 3 is for the task measurement. That's very important to have the right position to places the task thermoprobes for the measurement.
Mm-hmm. So I hear from your tips that those small changes, small retrofits have a big impact, first of all for the one who does the testing, but also just makes it way easier to do the testing right and conform according to those guidelines.
Right.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Thomas, for your exciting insights. If you have any questions or need assistance with your next calibration, please feel free to ask us directly. I wish you a successful day and a successful week, and I hope to hear from you soon.